you'll notice that today is Monday, July 27th, and as you may have seen in your email, the third meeting that we had scheduled that you had on your calendars has gone away. So you have that time back in your calendar. So the next time that this group will gather together is on Wednesday, September 23rd. The location is still to be decided, but obviously it will be a central location and it will be someplace large because that will be the meeting where all three of the work groups come together along with all of the co-chairs. So as you've known all along, the two other work groups have been moving in parallel with ours. Income and Stability just met in this room a couple of hours ago, and on Friday, Health and Safety met in this room. We had 5 issues. Income and Stability had 5 issues. Health and Safety had 6, and Health and Safety had a participant issue. This group, our group, did not have a participant issue come forth. Neither did Income and Stability. So our group and Income and Stability have completed their meetings in this phase, but Health and Safety still has 1 additional meeting. And the reason that I spend the time to say that is in case you bump into a friend, a coworker, a colleague who's a member of the Health and Safety work group and they talk about having another session, I don't want anybody to be confused about the timing on your calendar, okay? So we are done. That third date that you had held on your calendar, if you've not released it yet, I encourage you to go ahead and release it, all right? Questions about that? Nobody ever has a question when you give a meeting away, do you? So Heath is absolutely right. Today we're going to do 2 things. We are going to, in a large group format, talk about the 4 issues that this group discussed in the small group format the last time we were together. Then we will break back into a small group format, hear Jane Dockery's presentation on our 5th issue, have the small group table discussion, exactly like we did the time we were together before, and then without physically moving, we'll break back into the large group to have a large group discussion of that issue. If it's not perfectly clear, I promise you it will be when we do it, okay? So, as a reminder, the issues that we talked about last time were kindergarten readiness, graduation from high school, elementary math and reading proficiency, and career-ready credential, post-secondary credential. Those of you who were with us last time will remember you talked about these issues with your small groups. Hopefully you made notes in your red folders, whether you brought them with you or not. We do have a remaining issue, and that is adults lack stable employment. We'll get to that shortly, and Jane will brief us on that, and then we'll have the small group discussion. What we're going to do now is have the large group discussion where we can share our insights, our perspectives, our questions, our commentary on each of these 4 issues in the larger group. All right? So what I'd like to do is 1 issue at a time, entertain these questions. So let's start, if you will, at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start, which is kindergarten readiness. And what I'd like to ask the group to think about, in your small groups, were there any unique perspectives that bubbled up in your small group about kindergarten readiness that you think it would benefit the larger group to hear, to understand? If anybody does, just stick your hand in the air, and either Marva or Jim, my co-facilitators, have a microphone, because we've discovered in this room sometimes the acoustics, especially toward the back of the room, get a little faulty, and we want everybody to be able to hear. So, again, the question is, as your tables talked about kindergarten readiness when we were last together, what unique perspectives might have bubbled up in your small group that you think merits sharing with the larger group? And the other question to ask yourself is, was there anything missing from your small group discussion? As you sat at your table and talked about kindergarten readiness, was there a point when any of you might have said, you know, I really wish that Judy Hennessy was here because she would have a perspective on this issue. Or I really wish Lori Ward was here because she would have a perspective on this issue, and they weren't in your small group. Fill in that blank with anybody's name. So what was maybe missing from your discussion on kindergarten readiness?
One of the things on that one is Robin Lightcap and others have spent incredible amounts of time and energy on this particular issue. And so I think we struggled at a couple of points trying to figure out how do we add to what groups or individuals have been doing, where they have devoted, you know, X number of hours every day for the last X number of years just on this issue. Yeah. And is there anything that we're going to suddenly have an epiphany about that say, oh, guess what? We've got a whole new idea here, another strategy that needs to be put in place. And I think on this one in particular, you know, Robin is not in this group, but Robin has, along with others, have really totally devoted themselves to this. And I think we were trying to figure out how do we mesh whatever we're doing to make sure we don't create, here's another pie. Mm-hmm. And when we've already got people who've been making a pie.
Terrific.
That makes sense.
Excellent.
In our group, we talked about a similar issue in that we wanted to leverage the good work that's going on, but not neglect the issue in the process. Mm-hmm. So, but it would be more of a leverage and integration than something duplicative.
Okay. Very
These are such pressing, important issues. It was hard to look at these basic questions about, you know, how important has it been communicated. Those are so over the top in terms of what the needs are that everybody could feel you could spend all your time working on this particular issue and put all your energy in and not waste a bit of effort. And there's so many different people working on it, it being a good basis for some of the other successes that we're trying to do, that it was almost a no-brainer discussion about the questions that were being asked in that part.
I guess we did talk a little bit about what's an acceptable percent that isn't, that will never be ready, or what, and how do we address them? What can we do for that? Is it 5%? Is it 25%? Not sounding like a pessimist, but if you see what I mean, we'll never be at 100%, I don't think. So how do we deal with those that are never going to quite be ready?
Okay, interesting. Let's move in the order that we moved when we were together. When we were together, the next issue we talked about was elementary math and reading proficiency. So, same questions there. Were there unique perspectives that came up in your group that you find important to share, or were there perspectives missing from your group, again, about elementary math and reading proficiency?
This area, it is critical that we really look at a workforce of teachers that have the credentials in the classroom. And we're running short with trying to find the workforce to ensure that children have the best teachers in the classroom. So this has a workforce impact, this area.
Very good.
The need for a concerted effort on a regional basis, but particularly for the core city, on how different agencies could come together and incentivize teachers to come here and stay. Because it's very difficult to compete with school districts outside, even Ohio, who come because we have so many teacher training institutions, and sign people, give them moving bonuses, subsidized rent, a lot of different things to get them there. So it's really draining our pool of, we're investing in training them, but they're leaving us.
And I think it's the kind of thing where we really could think strategically about what we want to do. Because Lori's got the problem, that's what we talked about when we sat down, right, Lori?
Yes.
I mean, and Judy's got the problem. Understand the number of people going through teacher prep programs is doing this. It's going down. And it's gone down dramatically over the last 4 or 5 years. And you can sort of understand this. A person that has a 4-year degree walks out and goes to Lori, and you're going to pay her what, Lori?
Oh, did you say year one? Was that year one?
1 year one.
Oh, $36,000.
Yeah, $36,000, and they probably have a bigger loan than that. And so this is all the school districts that especially deal with higher poverty student populations, and that also have, like the STEM areas, Frank and I talked about this morning, special education, any of the specialty areas. So is there something we can do as a county that begins to address this? Because if you look around the U.S., there are counties that are trying to figure out how to incentivize the workforce that they have, that they want for their schools.
There is Ohio Week for teacher recruiters, and they go from one university, the major universities, within a week. So the recruiters who come from Los Angeles Unified or Baltimore can do it in a week. And at the end of the day, it is not unusual to see an Ohio candidate with 4 or 5 job offers, and they have to make a decision by 5 o'clock. All of them out of the area, and all of them incentivized in some way. So it really, you can see that it's very real, and there has to, if they can organize and do that, surely we could come back with something that keeps our graduates here.
And when you say out of the area,
Both coasts, they come in mass.
but it's
and
specifically
Texas.
out of Ohio, it's not just out of Montgomery County.
Oh, out of Ohio.
Okay.
And I don't know that we compete very well with some other areas in Ohio. I don't know that data, but you can clearly, just anecdotally, watch the recruits at the end of the day. They are not weighing whether I go to Toledo or Columbus or Dayton. It's, am I going to Virginia or Dallas, Texas? Or am I going to Prince Orange County, whatever it is, George County in Maryland? And they'll put signs up. By the end of the day, we're gonna hire 780 teachers.
The third issue we looked at the last time we were all together was high school graduation from high school. So what did you talk about in your small group that merits being shared with the larger group? Or what questions or head scratching came up in your smaller group that you'd like to ask your neighbors and peers about? This, I do remember that this was the topic that all the small groups turned to us fairly shortly and said, we're done, we're ready to move on to the next one. So the next topic was post-high school secondary credential. So that is, thank you, that is the topic that we discussed. What came up in that discussion in your small group that merits being shared across the larger group? And conversely, questions or desires for more information or a different perspective that might have come up in your small group?
I think it's all about, sustainability of the strategies and embracing of the strategies is what we were talking about.
Sustaining and embracing the strategies that are already in place. Okay.
I was just going to say to Chris's point earlier, we talk about all kids being ready to learn and to enter kindergarten ready for that. And, at URS, we deal with kids with disabilities and providing good quality early intervention services and therapies throughout, so that most of those kids are able to overcome a lot of challenges and be ready to learn. But I think we can't lose sight of the fact that there are going to be those that are going to struggle and that are going to need those extra supports in all of these areas, not just kindergarten readiness, but really is pervasive throughout.
Okay, then what we're going to do next is re-break into small groups for discussion of our fifth and final researcher issue, which is adults lack stable employment. And Jane Dockery is going to present that to us. Then in each of your small groups, we're going to spend about 20 minutes talking about the issue. Now, in your red folders, you have the criteria sheets. They look like this. We encourage you to use these sheets to take notes as your small group walks through the 5 criteria for this issue. And here's the reason that you keep hearing me encourage you to take copious notes. Because sometime in the middle of August, you will all get an electronic survey tool. like SurveyMonkey, but it's not gonna be SurveyMonkey, I don't think. And that will be when you have a chance to score all 5 of these issues that you've heard about and discussed. You will have a chance to score these issues, and the scoring will look reminiscent to these criteria sheet. It will use the 5 criteria. And if you're anything like me, sometimes you need a little reminder 2 or 3 weeks later to what was a key point or not a key point. So Jane's going to present, then at each one of your tables, we'd like you to have a discussion about criteria 1, criteria 2, criteria 3, 4, and 5. If during that small group discussion you have questions about the issue itself, stick your hand up in the air and we'll get it answered. If you have a question about process, Jim, Marva, or I, or Heath can answer your process question. We won't, for those of you who weren't with us last time, we won't be scoring at the end of today's session. We'll be coming back for a large group discussion, but there will be no scoring today. It will come to you sometime in the middle of August. Okay, and we'll do that for about 20 minutes. Questions about what's about to happen here? Okay, all right, so I'm going to yield the talking stick to Jane.
One thing you should know about this topic is that we also presented it at the Income and Stability Work Group as one of their top 4 or 5 topics. So hopefully I'll be more articulate on my second try. So this topic, stable employment, what we used to measure that was a Census American Community Survey question that asked, when did this person last work, even for a few days, within the past 12 months? 1 to 5, well, I did it again. When did this person last work, even for a few days? Then the responses are, within the past 12 months, 1 to 5 years, and over 5 years ago, or never worked. So what we used to identify those who have the least stable employment was to use that last response. So we selected people who have not worked for over 5 years or have never worked, who are also working age. So they're 16 to 64 years old. You don't have on your packet this table, but I provided here, and it shows the age category in the left column and the number of people in Montgomery County that applies to, and you can see over 55,000 16 to 64-year-olds who have never worked or haven't worked in 5 years. As it says in the bottom of that chart, this question is asked to everybody. It doesn't exclude those who might have a disability that precludes them from working. That estimate is roughly 4,000 adults. We did have the question the last time I presented it, that category age 22 to 49 is a pretty broad spectrum. Is there any differentiation within that? So one of our data analysts took a look at that, and what she showed me was that people in the higher end of that age category, 2 times as many of them are going to say, I haven't worked in over 5 years or I've never worked, as those in the lower end of that category, like age 22 to 28 or whatever the category was. So it is true, there's a difference across that spectrum. At the same time, this is a large number of people. What we find out in the data is, why does this matter? Well, you can see that under your sheet, the number of millions of dollars generated if these people, even taking them from the lowest end of that educational attainment level, moving them up even a little bit. Even we know that if you have 1 year of some college, your lifetime earnings are different than someone who hasn't. So even if we move them a little bit, there's quite a bit of income generated. You won't see as much movement on public assistance alleviated at that level because that's not enough to boost them off that roll. What we know about best practices, we know that the Ready to Work grants that U.S. Department of Labor just awarded $170 million. And most of those awards are going to nonprofit organizations because the focus is on life skills. And Bob was nice enough to let me know about a webinar that was held the other day with Harry Holzer out of Georgetown, who said the same thing. His #1 recommendation about people who are long-term unemployed is the supports. And so a lot of times that's seen as most evident or provided by nonprofits, with them subcontracting out the education and training piece of it. Only one of those Ready to Work grants was awarded to a community college. So there's all kinds of best practice. What does that support mean? It means case management, career coaching, time management, stress management, goal setting, financial planning, momentum, and transition to employment. So that's what we know about the best practices, and I think that's 5 minutes. Oh, one more slide. You have this slide, and it just gives you a little bit about the geography of those who are not participating in the workforce, but who are 16 to 64 years old. So the darker colors are where you have the lower participation rate. 40 to 60% of adults that are working age are working in these darkest areas, up to the lighter categories.
Can I ask a quick question? Was there any differentiation between people who wanted to be working versus who perhaps were stay-at-home moms or unable? Yeah, was there any of that in that?
We would have to do a cross-tabulation, but that is possible for us to look into, because you answer that question as well as answering this question.
So it doesn't say you were willing to work, but you haven't been able to find work?
That's not what this question answers, but there are other questions that we could cross-tab with it and see what we find.
So it's the same questions that we asked earlier. What came up in your small group? What came up in your small group discussion about this topic that you would like to make sure that everyone in all the groups, something that you might like to share, or were you having questions about the topic that you thought, ooh, I wish Dennis Grant was over here because he'd be able to share this or that perspective with us.
Stable employment, in terms of how it connects to the reoccurring themes, really would not improve coordination per se. So we said that was low. But we had trouble understanding how this all worked together. We thought, though, the relationship on B, C, and D was high. You have stable employment, that would improve those situations. We thought there was low relationship. You could have stable employment, but would that actually align transportation? No, but if you had better employment, maybe transportation could be better aligned. So that's how we looked at it. We're not sure if we got it right or not. Then on community support, we did believe for both consumers and the community at large that stable employment would have a high priority. We weren't sure to the degree that people would support efforts, in that their mouth may say one thing, their pocketbook might say another, but we consulted with Beth, and she said when this was initially designed, it wasn't to suggest that people would pass a levy. Because I know when we did education, part of what we said, well, will people actually pass a levy? So we said it was moderate in terms of some kind of support. And then when it said impact of efforts, we weren't quite sure what that meant. We made that a question mark. But then we, on criteria D and E, we believe there was a high priority or high evidence of valid data, meaningful metrics, independently studied best practices, and could those best practices be replicated?
We understand and maybe have more empathy for how difficult it is to manage an umbrella of services and allocate funds when they're all vying for very important efforts. We want to go back to the data just a little bit, because maybe we need more clarity on, our data stratified by age group? What does that tell us? And these charts that show where people are unemployed, it probably would be really helpful before those have a broader audience that we take into consideration also the placement of halfway homes, community-based mental health residences, those kinds of things, because they can skew the appearance of that, and that feeds into stereotypes about where people live and who's looking for a job. And that may be really unhealthy out of the study. Not only where incarcerated adults would fit in this big picture for Montgomery County, but also we all know in the core city there are so many of those establishments that do not exist in the suburbs. So that's another impact. But we're having a hard time saying that kindergarten readiness has a high impact, but 55,000 people not working has a higher or less, because it all feeds in. So maybe we're just not getting a good grip on how to distinguish that. Is anybody else having trouble with that?
Here's the bottom line. In 2000, we had 430,000 people with jobs. Today, we have around 380,000 with jobs. And we have about the same population.
Could you repeat those two numbers again?
In 2000, we had around 430,000 people with jobs, and this is metro area now, 430,000 people with jobs. Today, we have around 380,000 people with jobs, and we have about the same population.
Thank you.
To the researcher, that's what this is about.
We cannot deliver services, the same services or as many services, nor the depth of services that are required, simply based upon the concentrations that are here. So, you know, the remedies all have to be high for some of these people.
Right.
And when we allocate money, we have to get a little smarter, I think, in terms of how we add more to the areas that really need the services as opposed to those who might not need so many services. So I don't know that if we simply say high, low, medium, et cetera, we're getting at what we need to get at.
Gotcha.
I want to return to the discussion of the online survey. It is under development. I can't give you details on it right now because it's not done. It was clearly something that we wanted to be able to develop as these sessions unfolded, because the input from the various groups on the criteria will inform the way the survey is developed. All right, so the survey is under development. We anticipate that it will be coming to an email inbox near you somewhere in the middle of August. All right. Each work group will be scoring the issues that each work group has discussed. All right. So this work group will be scoring these issues, the ones we talked about last time and the one we talked about today. Income and stability has a different set. Health and safety has a different set. All right. If there's anybody in the room who would prefer a hard copy for any reason, please let us know. We can absolutely make that available to you. Okay. The last thing I'll say from a logistic point of view is please make sure that meeting that was on your calendar is off your calendar. We don't want anyone to show up in this parking lot only to find out that there's no meeting. We will inform you of the details of the September 23rd meeting sometime, in the coming weeks, okay?
So I think on behalf of the commissioner and everybody else involved with this process, first, thank you to each and every one of you for coming and participating in this. This has really strengthened the thinking that's moving forward to our strategic plan. And I think the results, as we see them, as they start to come out in this meeting on September 23rd,
Yes.
on September 23rd at 1 o'clock in the afternoon at a location to be determined, I think the results will be much stronger for having this level of participation. Beth said if you need a hard copy, let us know. We'll make sure you get a hard copy rather than an electronic copy. And then the last thing I'd remind everybody to do is if you have not had a chance to go back and take a look at the video from the last session, go back and look at it, refresh your memories. We'll have the rest of the material that's going to be available as well at the same location, or it'll be emailed to you. But take a look at that video, and if you have the time and ambition, go and look at the videos for the other two work groups. I think that sort of cross-fertilization is important at this point. We set up the work groups to effectively handle the work and the issues that were coming at us, but really, as so many of you have already commented on, these issues are cross-connected in so many different ways. Sometimes when you break them out like this, it's a little bit more efficient, but it also creates this artificial point of view that they are somehow separate. Other than that, I think you're done. Thank you. Enjoy your extra time from today's meeting.